In his 2000 book, Bowling Alone, public policy professor Robert Putnam details how American community life has collapsed since the beginning of the 20th century. Not at all that things were wholly utopian at the time. The beginning of the last century was the heart of the nadir, a time when lynchings of African Americans in the KKK were at an all-time high. Yet, even at the time, there were strong bonds in segregated communities through strong social organizations and clubs. In the age before the internet, before the late-stage capitalism hustle, it seems there is a collective memory of a greater sense of community. As that sense evaporated along with the fabled 40-40-40 compact, so pressure condensated on our educators to step into the community vacuum. The Reagan-era report, A Nation in Crisis, pinned our national woes on the education system, eventually precipitating the federalization of education through the George W. Bush No Child Left Behind Act, then Obama's Double Down with a Race to the Top and Every Student Succeeds Act. This trajectory of reactive legislation has put greater pressure on teachers to solve our social woes, which reach into the ever more precarious world of work, the affordable housing crisis, over-policing, ridiculous rates of unnecessary incarceration, the opioid crisis, and most recently, a pandemic. Teachers have been compelled to close the mythologized achievement gap between white students and students of color in spite of differences in school funding, economic stability at home, food insecurity, immigration status, and perhaps most importantly, in spite of the fact that our standardized tests are crude and inequitable measuring sticks for success. Teachers have been lauded as the panacea for our problems. In today's episode of Wide Ruled, the first of Season 2, we delve into some thoughts on how we might resurrect a community ethic in schooling. I'm Nathaniel Bozarth. I'm pleased to present the following conversation with my friend and someone I truly look up to, David Muhammad. I know you recently talked, like you were interviewed by the Kansas City Star to talk a little about critical race theory. Mm-hmm. We could go that direction. That whole conversation feels like such a crazy red herring. I don't know 100% if I want to entertain it. But that's one way I could see our conversation going. I think I'd totally be interested just to hear about martial arts and education, how that drives you, how it's so much of what you do. Yeah. And I just want to say, and I think I texted this to you. Your dad had you teaching at 9. That's amazing, man.
Yeah, man. It's been a journey. It's still a journey. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. And then did you recently, are you moving into an administration position at Kansas City Girls Preparatory Academy?
No, I left KC Girls.
Oh, you left there. Whoa. What's next? So are you all Sankofa?
I'll be administration at Pembroke.
Wow. That's crazy. Pembroke. So did they did they poach you? Or did you go out and get it?
I think it's a big mixture of both. So Myra Aguirre is a good friend. She's now the president of Hall Family Foundation. And I wasn't even first I'll say I wasn't even looking. I was like, I was at a place I was like, okay, KC Girls Prep is what it is. Virtual year had been an interesting one.
Yeah.
But the school always, I had some privilege. I could do whatever I wanted, to be honest. I was teaching martial arts, and there really was no blueprint other than the one I created. And there was a lot of, I had some leverage, but I saw some red flags that, bother me about the charter system. And, but I was somewhat intrigued about potentially seeing what could happen in the future. I was like, okay, whatever. So then Myra sent me this job job posting about a director of diversity and inclusion position at Pembroke. And I was like, this is too big for me. Because if I'm backtracking, when I was in Shawnee Mission, there was a there was some internal people who wanted me to apply for the diversity position that was coming. The Dr. Tyrone Bates position
For the Shawnee Mission District or for Shawnee Mission East?
for the district. So the principal who had been at East moved up into the district and was like, "Hey, Dave, I think they're going to create this position. I think you'd be great for it." And I was always like, "Yeah, I mean, you know." And as I was getting more experience, I was getting to a point where I felt like for one person to have a job like that over the entire district just wasn't fair to that person, and I don't think it was the most effective. I
Mm-hmm.
also knew that I had no administrative experience, and the chances of me really getting it were slim to none. So when I left Shawnee Mission, that was part of it. Was like I just didn't see myself. I
Mm.
didn't go on to be a principal. I was a little burnt out in the classroom, and so that was all that. And so when Myra came at me with this position, I was very much like, I don't know, man, that's a big position. I've done equity consulting. I've done some presenting, you know, race project stuff, but that's not the same as like creating a vision plan for diversity and inclusion for an entire system. So I reached out to some people that I knew that I looked at as mentors, you know, Corey Scholes, who works for Kaufman Foundation, and her daughter goes to Pembroke.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I reached out to Rodney Smith of Sophic Solutions,
Yeah.
and he actually just done some he did an audit, like an equity audit for the school, him and his wife. Reached out to him and I reached out to my former principal. I was like, man, should I even go for this? And they were like, yes, absolutely, 100%, you'd be great. And so I was okay, I'll go for it. Still internally not feeling like I was really qualified, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got 2 interviews. I think a lot of that was based upon my references were really high. And the first interview I think I did very well. And in the second interview, I think I had some highlights, but they could see I was a little green. And then they came back and offered the dean of middle school position. And so I really have to take my hats off to them for, well, I should say my hat off of appreciation to them not casting me to the side and seeing some form of potential in me. Because when they showed me the dean of middle school job description, when I read it, I was like, okay, that's something that I feel like I could do.
Mm.
And that's something that I enjoy doing. It was the kind of work that I was already doing when I was at East unpaid. You know, a lot of like restorative justice-ish type stuff, creating student activity opportunities, building community. I was like, okay, I can wrap my head around this. And this would be a good entryway into admin where I can kind of grow some muscles. And I
Mm-hmm.
just felt like it was time for me to grow up in the education world, you know. And I don't know if this is what you're looking for, but I'll just give it to you content wise. Like, you know, it was easy for me to check in and check out of the stuff. So like at the end of the day, I was always just a teacher, you know, or I was just a consultant.
Mm.
So, you know, if it was a race project event, we would do those activities, but it was only so many kids and it was several moments that you create that weren't really necessarily impacting one entire system. I wasn't changing the scope of Shiny Mission East. You know what I mean? So
Mm.
the responsibility wasn't going to fall on me completely if something was misjudged, you know? So just like when I was at East, when we brought in Jane Elliott and it was kind of there was some tension. It couldn't completely fall on me because I was like, well, I wasn't completely in control. I'm just a teacher. And so as I've gotten older and gotten deeper into this work like yourself, I've started to wonder like, when am I going to wear some big boy shoes and be willing to
Mm.
have that responsibility and really try to affect an entire system? And not to say that I'm the one person that can do it. And I think that the hire that they did for the director of diversity, I think he's very qualified. I'm excited to work and support him
For Shawnee Mission.
for Pembroke.
Oh, for Pep.
And for
Okay.
Shiny Mission, yeah. Dr. Tyrone Bates is a mentor as well. He was somebody that I called for advice. Um,
Nice.
so I think very highly of him, and I think he's doing a great job at Shiny Mission. So I don't want to discredit that. He was the right man for the job. And I think that the person who they hired at Pembroke is the right man for the job. And I'm looking forward to supporting him. But in this dean position, I think it's putting me in a space where I'm gonna have to have accountability. I'm seeing the title itself comes with, like, when I tell people, which I hate doing, people were like, "Oh my God, really at Pembroke?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm trying to stay calm, trying to stay level-headed around it." But I'm recognizing that what it comes with it. And I think that anybody who wants to make real change at some point has to like step out of the just like low level, feel good, grassrootsy ish, and like step into some leadership,
Mm.
if we want to do some stuff. So
So I feel like for listeners not in the Kansas City area, we should say so. Pembroke is it's an old school. It's been around for a long time in Kansas City. I forget its prior. Do you remember? Do you know what its prior name was before it was Pembroke?
Pim Day. So yeah, it's one of the most prolific private schools in our city.
Yeah, it's expensive. It's expensive to go there.
28,000 a year.
So I mean, talk about so you taught at Shawnee Mission East before, which is also a good portion of that student body population, a very affluent. Then you were at Kansas City Girls Preparatory Academy, which is probably a very different look.
Absolutely.
So I mean, what's that move from Kansas City Girls Preparatory Academy to Pembroke gonna be like?
You know, one, I have to say that the teaching experience for Kansas City Girls Prep was unique because we were virtual.
Yeah,
But there were still, I think the pandemic, if nothing else, highlighted the inequities in education more than anything has in a long time. Because when
yeah,
you look at least in Kansas City, I can't speak for the rest of the country. The elite private schools, they stayed open, and they stayed open in a safe, responsible way. I know that there were public school districts and such that, were kind of rogue and COVID cases were happening, but like, I knew what was going on at Scion. I knew about Barstow. These are other elite private schools in the city, Rockhurst, St. Teresa's. They stayed open, and, kids were wearing masks and they had plexiglass and, social distance. They did the whole bit. And it's amazing what resources can do. Now, I think along with those resources, I think it's the emotional capacity to even create ideas to deal with it. Because at a school like where I was at, KC Girls Prep, one, our students were coming from the hardest hit population of COVID, right? Like
yeah,
lower income people of color were hit with COVID the hardest, mainly in many ways because they were working service jobs where they were coming into contact with people.
right,
They couldn't get away from it. And then, so when we went virtual, we had to deal with things like these kids don't have Wi-Fi service, so we got to get them hot spots. How are they going to still eat?
yeah,
Because many of them, they were getting two main meals a day through school. Are they
right.
going to be safe? My first week, I had a girl talk about like, I couldn't sleep last night because I was up last night hearing gunshots.
Mm,
These were fifth and sixth grade girls.
yeah,
So now, you know, we don't, I think all kids experience this same thing, but when I say what I'm saying, what I'm about to say, but for most kids, school is a place we go to escape, whether we are conscious of it or not. You spend a good portion of your time outside of your house, which allows you an ability to get away from the norm or your trauma.
yeah,
So for kids at our school, many of them were at Casey Girls Prep were living in environments where there was crime, food deserts, the whole gamut. No Wi-Fi, maybe no air conditioning, all these dynamics. So when they came to school, they was like, hey, for at least 8 hours, I'm getting away from that.
right.
And now you're saying school is going to be in that space. And so I felt like, when we were coming into the school year, when I got on and the staff, and this is not a discredit or a criticism to my administration. I think highly of them. They had their hearts in the right place. But I think there was so much energy that was given to the traumatic environment that these kids were in that we couldn't even take the time to conceive what it could have been like to bring the students in building. Even though we only had fifth and sixth grade students, it was a second year open.
Hmm.
I think we maybe had like 90 kids, and our building was huge. So we could have, when I see what these other schools did, I'm like, we could have made it work. And
Wow.
I just think that we didn't have the mental space, the emotional space to conceive it, to think about it. And when you, and that's for privilege, right? It's just like when we talk about like male privilege or white privilege. I don't have to think about, am I going to be hungry? I don't have to think about, am I going to get pulled over? I don't have to think about how people are going to see me. So because I don't have to think about that, I have room to think about all this other stuff. I have room to be creative. I have room to be, but if I'm hungry, I don't have time to think about art. I don't have time to think about, because
It's
I'm
the
not,
it's
I
the
don't have time to,
Maslow's hierarchy.
I don't have time to think about working out. Oh, you know, and I'm going down a rabbit hole here, but like, oh, they should exercise more. That's the last thing I'm thinking about. Like I get home, I'm not thinking about that. If
Which enter you because you're teaching martial arts in tight spaces, home spaces,
I,
chaotic
it
spaces.
was hard to get girls to come on camera. And
Mm.
I found myself at times getting frustrated because I'm a human being, I'm not perfect. But when I would step back from it, I had to remind myself, okay, if I was 11 years old at home,
11.
yeah, the last thing that I would want to do is get on the camera with this guy who was the only male teacher in the whole school, trying to tell me to do burpees and push-ups and squats and kick. And I've got my little 5-year-old brother running around, like there's all these dynamics, so there'd be classes where I might get 2 girls on camera. I had girls, I'd never heard their voice. I had never seen their face ever the entire year. They
And
didn't
these
turn
are people that did you ever have them in person before that point? So like you still would,
no,
if you saw them on the street, you wouldn't recognize them.
so this is a conversation piece. We did bring the kids back in for map testing. We found a way to do that. We bust them in and they took map testing. And
All
that was
right.
and that was the first time I saw a lot of kids. I had never seen them. It was like,
So
oh, so you're Janae. Okay. I've never seen you. You never turned in an assignment.
I am very curious about that because I'll tell you how that hits me. The first thing that hits me is like this is the pedestal that we put testing on, that like we wouldn't have people come in for any other reason. Like, so school is what about learning, education, socializing, building character, all these things. We can do that all remote, but then when we get to the standardized test, the standard Missouri assessment program test, then we got to bring them in. That is that how you're feeling about it?
Yeah, I mean, it was like we actually did 2 standardized tests through the year. One of them we did online, the NWEA testing. We did that, I think, twice, and that was interesting to do a standardized test online. And then when we got to the lab testing, I was like, oh, how quickly we figured out a way. Now, again, this was like March, so by that point, teachers have been vaccinated, and there was a lot less COVID fear.
Mm.
But again, I go back to, you know, there was a point where when me and my wife were looking at where to send my kids to school, we
Mm-hmm.
visited Scion Lower School,
Mm-hmm.
and they hadn't shut down. And I was just looking at it like, I was like, wow, like it's not the money that's affording them the opportunity to do this. It's just the priority, right? And it is the privilege
Is
because
it
if
like a
I'm,
staffing thing? Like, is it because, like, with Scion, is there more staff, so there's more like administration to kind of work through the problem solving than at like Kansas City Girls Preparatory Academy, which had only been open for a year prior to that, was kind of it's a startup essentially.
I mean, you know, I've asked myself the question of like, is it the finances? And I think when I look at it, schools have money. It's where they choose to spend their money,
Mm.
you know. Um, at our school, um, and I'm not trying to, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus because again, there's so many dynamics, but you know, if there were certain times where if we needed certain things, they could spend it. I thought it would be cool if every girl got a karate uniform. They bought it like that, and I set up. They shipped them to the school. I showed them where they could get them. They had them shipped to the school, and I set up days like on the weekends where the girls could drive up and I would deliver them, I would hand them the karate uniform. Maybe 50% of the girls came and picked them up. But
Mm.
they boom, they spent the money like that. When before the map testing, we finally came back in the building, but we were still teaching virtual. So they let teachers come in the building and teach from the building and teach virtually. Because
Mm.
before that, we were all teaching at home. I had
Mm-hmm.
never met my principal. I never met any of my staff in real life.
Mm.
And if a teacher needed, a fan or a space here or like that, boom, they got it. And so there was money. It's just how you choose to allocate it. And I think that a lot of schools, that's what happens. And I'm not even going to get into the salary of our CEO, but like, I mean, I think it's just where you put your priorities. And I think it's the expectations that the community has, right? So like if I'm looking at like a Pembroke, if I'm spending $28,000 a year on my child to go to your school, you better figure out a way for them to come to school. I expect it,
Right.
right? And as a staff, and I think in as administration, I feel the onus is on me to please you because I recognize your expectations as a community. This is just my thoughts.
Yeah, there's a
So,
it seems like there's something about who are you accountable to? Like
right. And I
when a
think that when we work with these communities that are, whether you want to call it lower income or whatever, we approach them with a deficit mindset. So we think about first all the stuff they don't have, which turns into all the stuff that we can't do or what they won't be able to handle,
Hmm.
as opposed to recognizing, hey, look at all that they've survived and that they do make happen and that they do value, and what can we create from that? And I think that that's where we have to flip it. You know, I mean, that's just my opinion. And it's easier said than done because, of course, with COVID, you're dealing with people's lives, right? And so I understand that that was real. Teachers' lives were at hand too. I just feel like we didn't, in a lot of schools, didn't give enough space to ideating on the potential possibilities.
Hmm.
And we may not ever really learn the full effect that it had on kids, but
I'm
you
so afraid of that. I'm so
yeah,
because there's probably you probably had I mean you talked about kids you never saw and never turned on their screen, but did you have kids that just like vanished? Because that's something that I had heard about kind of in the heat of it that
yep,
former secretaries of education were saying there were 3 million students across the country who were just
yep.
gone.
We had
Like
several. We had
and I don't mean I maybe I shouldn't be vague, not gone like passed away, but like gone as in
They just stopped coming.
yeah, they exited the school system. Like, what's that do to a kid when you've lost a year of learning? Like that changes your life.
Yeah, and then on top of that, I think you deal with like you would hear kids say stuff like, "Why don't we get to open back up? Such and such schools open back up." And so what is that messaging does that tell them? Like, are we not good enough? Is something wrong with us? And again, we were in a unique situation where nobody had ever been through this before. But it really kind of hurt to know that it was really when you looked at the dividing lines of certain school communities that were able to make it happen. It was
Mm.
along money lines, it was along race lines, it was like every dividing line you could look at within equity, it was there. And
Yeah, it hurts.
hopefully this next year we can do some great things. All these schools can do some great things because kids are super resilient, and it'll hopefully become something that they can grow through as opposed to something that negatively affects them for long term.
How do you, so I'm curious, like if one of your students from Kansas City Girls Preparatory were like to enter this Zoom and were to raise that question to you, like, hey, I'm an 11-year-old. Why is it that this white private schooled wealthy kid was able to go back to school and I wasn't? Like, how do you frame that in a way that's empowering and not like def- disempowering, defeating?
Mm, it's a big question. I mean, I think I would tell them that the question you're asking is part of a problem that existed before COVID.
Mm,
So the why of like why were they able to? There was a lot of why they are able to's before that you didn't even know about, you know. And that's part of a bigger system problem that was around before you. And the biggest thing that we can do is help you, assist you in evolving through it. Because I mean, the reality of it is like it's just a manifestation of what was already there. You know, it's
yeah.
nothing new. Um, you know, why is it that those schools have healthy lunches? Why is it that those schools have teachers that feel emotionally stable and that stick around for long periods of time? Why do they draw, you know, the teachers who are going to be long term and not only Teach for America type teachers, not just, and that's not a discredit against Teach for America.
But we're
Um,
talking about less trained, like 5 weeks of summer training, hop in, hop out. That's
Absolutely.
the trend.
Why is it that you know these schools are getting the scholarship opportunities, when they already have financial resources? Like there's so many big questions that we can ask. Why is it that the politicians want to go there and speak and meet and greet and not come to your school? I mean, there's all these questions that we can ask why, and at the end of the day, I think that like, you know, some of the best things we can do for kids is empower them to raise their voices,
Mm,
because um, now is a time with social media and stuff that they have the capacity, you know, and I'll tell you, with all of my moments that I was frustrated, there were times where I was blown away by some of these girls.
mm.
Some of those kids were phenomenal, and they all were that I got to work with. But I mean, there was some of them, it was just like, you are going to be absolutely amazing. And I think that the school itself, has a lot of potential. It's just that they also have the potential to, fall into some of the same, you know, um, pockets that a lot of charter schools and
Yeah.
school excellence do, that have been proven throughout the country to be somewhat detrimental and not always the most sustainable. So
Yeah, I want to dive in, like double click on that in a minute, but first, I mean, you'd love to hear the connection between, you talked about like the importance of helping students to raise their voices, to be aware of their own power and voices. How does teaching martial arts, in all the different ways that you do, all the different spheres that you do, how does that do that? How is that part of that?
yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly kind of where I'm headed with my big vision. You know, I think when we look at schools, we have to stop putting all of the responsibility to save kids on the school itself and on the teachers. And that's what happens a lot, especially at charter schools. They put a lot on the backs of these very well meaning, well intentioned teachers, and it burns them out.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if, okay, the school recognizes that you need to embrace anti racism. Okay, all the teachers are going to be trained and expected to be able to implement it into their curriculum. The school recognizes that social and emotional is important. All the teachers need to be trained. So here's another thing, boom, right? And they need to be able to implement it. Here's a curriculum, and it's not to say that those things are not important, because teachers should go through training for that, to be aware. But a lot of those schools, instead, they won't hire one person to focus on those things. And there's not a lot of energy given to looking at outside of the school resources that are wrap around, that can build a village around the school, right? There's that saying, it takes a village to raise a child. So the primary purpose of a school really should be academics. If we're really looking at it, it should be to increase the academic progression of a child.
Nurture like how to learn, a love of learning.
Absolutely. That should be the main focus. And teachers should be hired to be professionals in that vein. Now, that does not mean they shouldn't have a lens of equity and all that, because that's going to make them be better within their profession. So I want the math teacher to be a math professional and be the very best math teacher that they can be. That should be their focus. And the same with social studies and English and all of that. And then there should be other resources available to the kids that maybe come from community partners that fill in the gaps of what you feel like kids should also be developing. And I think that that's where spaces like martial arts come in. And I think that that's where schools and districts can get creative to open doors for kids that wouldn't be open. And this is why I was intrigued by Casey Girls Prep, because I was like, here are this community of girls who may not be able to afford martial arts training, right? And so I'm going to get paid a teacher's salary to teach something that I love to do. That was the idea in my mind, right? Now, I've decided to leave, you know, whatever, you know, that's a whole thing. But I still believe in the concept and I believe in the school. And so this summer, and when I say this, I'm not like taking my hat off. So I'm just giving this example. But like, I thought about several girls who I saw were very committed to martial arts and enjoyed it throughout the year. And I offered 10 of them full ride scholarships to our summer karate camp. Now, one of them took me up on it, right? And I think she really enjoyed it. But it got me to thinking, and I was like, you know what? When I went into that school, I said that my vision was that every girl who was in my class who stuck with it, by the time they graduated from high school, they were going to get a black belt. I still envisioned that. And so I'm planning to offer the school that any girl who wants can come train in my dojo for free.
Wow.
Period. And, through high school, if they want it. And becoming a community partner for the school where they know here's a resource for those girls who may want that. And what we offer beyond self-defense, is reinforcing character development, all these other values that schools consider to be important. And hopefully that can be something that takes the pressure, one other vein that takes pressure off of the school. There's a lot of other great resources out there that can do that. Dance schools, art, STEM, there's all these dynamics that are out there. And I think that if schools look at it and say, how much can we allocate to subsidize the cost that place may be losing by offering for free, right? So can we, or maybe make a deal? Hey, if we give you, I'm gonna throw out a figure, $5,000, how many girls can you take?
It's like a extracurricular club on steroids at that point. It's like
100%. So
because
then
it's not just an extracurricular club that a teacher who has a full-time job teaching, a full teaching load, is then also sponsoring the track team. So in this case, it's a wraparound service offered as a component, as a plug-in. Yeah.
And you're bringing in the community. That community outside people, now they know about the school. They feel committed and connected to the school. And these girls recognize there's something bigger than the school, right? So it's great to have. Go ahead.
I was gonna say it's interesting because it sounds like what you're talking about, the picture you're painting. It sounds like something that probably existed more at some time in the past. Not let's see. At least I'm thinking about like in at least in. Well, yeah, like I'm trying to think like would this have been more present like after 1954, after integration or before integration? But I imagine in the Black community before integration, this was a thing. In the white community, in all white schools, it was probably a thing that it takes a village, that sense of community before we had phones and the internet, especially before we had the suburbs, when people were when populations were more dense in the city, that probably is something that would have been more common.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one, when we look at the inequity, right? if you take a school like Shawnee Mission East, you don't necessarily need that because the school is a one-stop shop. They have it all.
Mm.
Kids can take art classes, music classes, dance, play a sport, you know, humanitarian work if I want to, after school clubs. It's all there. Now, some of it's teacher led, some of it's people coming in, but it's a big enough machine where it's there. And I live in and it's in a neighborhood that I could walk down the street and get a job. It's all right there. Okay. Well, what do you do when environments don't have that? That's when you create it, and it's that's how it is in Europe. Like in Europe, a lot of like there's no high school sports. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
and so you go out and there's club and stuff like that. But you create inequity a lot of times when that happens, and so like who can get it, right? And so I think that that's where again schools have to start looking at one, not being afraid to spend some money and going supporting community partners that might not even know that you exist. And now it works both ways because especially something like post COVID, right? I'm looking at how do I sustain my karate business, right? So if you come at me and say, hey, let's create a relationship where we're going to pay you X amount of dollars, how many girls can you take? It's a win-win for both sides,
Mm.
right? In many different veins. It's a win for me on the financial barrier, but it's also a win for me just on the humanitarian standpoint, of what I'm able to do to expand the outreach of my business. And for your school, you can go to these girls in the beginning of the year and say, look at all this stuff that's available for you. If you have school counselors and social workers and you notice this kid is dealing with this, hey, you might want to consider this art program that would be phenomenal for you. Oh, you can't afford it? That's not even a concern. We need to get you transportation. Okay, all the girls going to art on Thursdays, we're going to arrange a bus drop there. You know what I mean? Like it could be
Yeah.
happening that, where, and I just think it's just ideation around it and
Yeah. Do you think
reallocate.
do you think there'd have to be some sort of like certification or like I'm thinking like so public schools funded by tax dollars of individuals, does there have to be some sort of certification or some sort of like uh I don't know, like for Casey Integrity Karate, does there have to be something like that in order to make that flow?
I
Uh
think you would just have to have me sign on as a whether it will be a vendor or a supporter or whatever of your school and some kind of contractual agreement. But I think like, the reality is that Kansas City is being taken over by charter schools, right? They
yeah.
have a lot of autonomy. And if I'm a charter school and I'm looking at how to continue to get funders, the biggest thing I can do is take them around the city and show all the extra activities that my kids are doing. I think it's a brilliant idea of how to expand the community, expand the outreach, and take the pressure off the backs of your teachers to do more and more and more. Take the pressure off the backs of your admin, because now you have these outreach partners that's what their profession is. That's what they specialize in. You can even do it with, you know, uh, if kids are dealing with trauma and there's a need for therapy,
Yeah.
you know. And so if you have therapists in the community that, that are maybe not as high profile, but are looking for opportunities to grow and expand and to give back,
Yeah.
there's people who do it pro bono. It's just a matter of, look, if you can get a grant from Kaufman Foundation, you can do this,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. And there's plenty of grant there's lots and lots of grant money being spent to do other things. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they're building an entire new building for their high school because their plan is to expand to high school. So if you can
This is
spend those, in case you go,
Kansas City case growth, but yeah.
yeah, So yeah, I think that's right. So with the martial arts, kind of come back to your question, like I used to have this desire of being like full-time karate and it be like, you know, big time business, really the whole gamut, like some other karate schools do, and have success financially. My my mindset has shifted a lot through COVID
Hmm.
because one, our karate school was always community based. It was always the focus of giving back. When I was a kid, my dad charged people $25 a month for tuition. It was like
Wow.
it wasn't about the money. But we are a business and we have to sustain. But my long-term vision is like for it to be a community beacon and to be somewhat socialistic in the aspect that like those who can pay, and that subsidizes those who may not be able to. We started a nonprofit leadership program in the karate school, which is Sankofa. And, that's training kids to learn how to teach and give back. But I'm also looking at like how are other ways that Sankofa can like pull people in. So like next summer, my goal is to hopefully raise them up enough money throughout the year to where I do one summer camp that's full pay and another summer camp that's only for kids who are not in karate who couldn't afford it. And they can come the whole week for free, based on how much I raise. So if I raise enough, then 20 can come, and I'll go to local schools in our area and say, do you have kids who would benefit from this program? They'd have to apply for it. There'll be an interview process to show they really are sincere about it. And they come for free, supporting community service. And even like this offering Casey Girls Prep the free, that's like the vision is like,
That's cool.
And then that way I'm not stressing about making karate my main source of income. But I think that in time it may happen where, it's Sankofa and the karate school, and that's kind of how I'm managing. But in the meantime, I enjoy having one foot in the world of academia because I'm learning a lot and I'm connecting myself to other communities. It's increasing my network.
And then Rockefeller Records also comes in there at the same time and signs you.
Yeah, let's not even talk about music. Yeah, all of it's connected. But yeah, that's kind of the vision. I think I think we have to change COVID has taught me like a lot of us have to change our business models.
Yeah.
Because if it's just about you and it's about the dollar, you're not going to survive. We wouldn't have lasted if it wasn't for the strength of our community. One, like our landlords were great, praise God. But we had a very strong, committed community that believed in us and that we believed in. And so when people were reaching out to us saying, hey, we don't have a job right now, we were like, yeah, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's not about that. It's bigger than that. And I think I believe in, I'm a man of faith, but if a person is not, I believe in good inertia. You put good out there and it's going to come back. And if you're focused on your dollar and yourself, we got to realize that this is bigger than all of us, and so, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with the business. And I think that there's a lot of places that connecting to these schools can really help a lot of kids, and it can also help their business. It can be a win-win for sure.
That's cool. That's cool. You got time for one more question?
Yeah, I'm good.
Well, I don't know what time we're at. So I want to kind of do a full circle thing here. Gosh, there's so many things I want to ask, but so at Shawnee Mission East, you were the only Black educator. I think there was one other Black man in the school, but he wasn't a teacher. Is that right?
He was he taught woodshop.
He taught woodshop. Okay.
Yeah, he did teach. But yeah, we were like amongst the only two Black male teachers in the whole district. There was very few.
In the whole district. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's not. Yeah.
So were you walking into a similar environment at Pembroke? And what's that feel like?
There's, the head high school principal is a Black male, and you have this new director of diversity and inclusion who's a Black male. The associate principal in the middle school I'm working with is a Black woman. But if we're looking at the whole picture, it's not the most diverse space. I mean, really, but what I am intrigued by is, I'm looking to see how willing they are to confront the issues that they have admitted exist. So in the process of applying, because one thing I came into this job really understanding was like, they're not just interviewing me, I'm interviewing them too, to
totally
see space. And so far, there's been a lot of recognition of holes that they have as a community, which I feel is refreshing,
Yeah.
Every school has holes.
It's like step one, though. You can recognize and then, all right, yay, we're done. Yay, white people.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, especially, reading Ibram Kendi, Black people do it too. We do it. Heck, Casey Girls Prep was almost all 88% Black, and our staff, was more than 50% teachers of color. And we had holes, we had areas where we needed to grow, myself included. And so I think, the hiring of the diversity and inclusion director is a great step forward. Hopefully it's not performative. I believe, that he is someone who takes the job seriously. So I think there's a lot of potential.
Yeah.
Um, right now I'm going in with a very optimistic yet cautious mindset because it's going to take some time. You're dealing with old money, you're dealing with old mindsets, but there's also a lot of kids and a lot of families who are ready for change. And I'm excited by the possibilities. And I think that my vision is that why not? Why can't we envision the top 1%, what it could be like if they got behind these issues, right? Because at the end of the day, reality speaking, us poor folk like us, because we're poor when we compare ourselves to them.
Absolutely.
Like if we have,
No question.
if you haven't realized
Good.
it,
I mean, come on. What 1 year's tuition is at that school is more than my college education.
right, 100%, yeah.
Yeah.
And so we can only turn the dial so much, but you've got some of these kids and families who can make one phone call and be in the White House. I mean, like they have those access.
Yeah.
And so it's really real, when you're talking about kids whose names are on the sides of buildings and are on streets and stuff like that, and, have legacy and these types of things at certain colleges. I'm excited by like what could happen if we connect Pembroke with some of the other private schools to do social justice work and
Yeah.
start having conversations. So I've talked to Race Project, and the idea is to bring Race Project to the middle school because it's all been only high school. And so they've been
Nice.
looking at middle school, and I'm like, let's make Pembroke one of the first places. And I'm like, what would it be like? I mean, you've been in Race Project stuff. Like,
Yeah.
we need the private schools in that conversation.
I mean, the meme that I keep seeing that makes a lot of sense to me is that if your kid's old enough to experience racism, then they're old enough to talk about it, and that goes for white and black kids. If your kid is if white kids, if your kid is old enough to perpetuate, to discriminate, to throw out a racial slur, like it's clearly time that they're old enough to talk about it.
My 7-year-old daughter was asking about the Derek Chauvin case. Like, why is
Wow.
everybody celebrating? Well,
Wow.
she wanted to understand what was going on. So it's like, yeah, like you're 100% right. Like, we get it, man. Like I'm still uncovering crap that I have in my mind. Like, oh man, that might have been wrong to watch Coming to America because it led to a lot of Black versus African jokes. Like I'm like processing all these things that's been put into me. You know, um,
Well, don't beat yourself too much because come on, even Kendi has a very nuanced view of that. It's like it's how you watch it, like it's how
yeah.
you absorb it.
I asked him, yeah, I asked him in that
Oh,
thing.
that's right, you did. I was there. Yeah,
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 but yeah, it's just like processing all these things, like what this stuff did to us, and
yeah.
uh, but yeah, I think I'm feeling optimistic, but um, this is my 13th year in education, and I recognize that things don't happen overnight, and that I'm just one person, and baby steps, man. We'll see what happens.
I mean, I think it's a really cool perspective that you're saying, um, talking about like the privilege and the power that money has, the power that like the network of the parents and families of the people at Pembroke, and that if you if there's like if there's like one white racist acting person that you change, like that could have some really cool ripple effects, and undoubtedly you're going to be affecting more than just one kid.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think yeah, I think that the potential for ripple effects is really strong, and because the community is so close knit,
Mm,
right? Like, so a lot of these kids have been going to that school since they were kids, and so who's having these conversations with them? You
Yeah.
know, there's punishment, there's acting like it's not happening. And so giving kids the space to have the conversations, I think they'll get there on their own if you give them the space to be where it's okay to make a mistake and it's okay to, say the wrong thing and be checked in a healthy, caring way. It's too like right now, everybody's pointing fingers at each other and nobody's talking to each other, and so where is there a better space than schools to
Yeah.
say
Man,
and have
and also like the like talking about middle school, like so I'm thinking about I had been searching for a while, like when was the first time in school that we really talked about race or racism, and the first time it stuck for me as a white male was my senior English class, um, and I think that's feels unique about that is though that like I went to school as a white male that were not all white,
yeah.
that were fairly diverse, like from middle school on up. Uh, and how exciting, how life changing would it have been if, like, as a seventh grader or as an eighth grader, um, we talked about the fact that, hey, we don't all look the same. And hey, we're a socioeconomically diverse school. Like, there were some like amazing, I feel really privileged for some of those experiences that I had. And now you're kind of getting to bring I don't know. I think that's exciting just thinking about like what if those conversations would have happened in middle school for me. I mean, from your upbringing and like what do you remember from school? Like did you have conversations about race at school in middle school or was it ever?
We didn't talk about race really until an extracurricular trip that I took that was optional. I went to this thing called it was called
And what grade?
I was in high school. I was like
High
a
school.
sophomore, junior, maybe a senior. I don't know. It was this thing called Unitown. And I think it might be coming back, but they had us, it was some kids from China Mission South. We went on this like retreat with some kids from Paseo High School. And
And which school did you go to?
I went to South. I went
You
to
went to
Sherman.
South.
And we had to like spend a weekend with kids from there and we did some really deep, like you did the like privileged walk and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
We had some conversations about like about race and stereotypes, and it was powerful because I had all these thoughts but there was nowhere to like really explore it. But yeah, that was like 30 of us out of the entire school. um
Wow.
and maybe that's because I didn't take some classes that maybe would have pushed that. But yeah, the conversation wasn't there. And I went to a school that was predominantly white. There was like 35 of us Black students in the entire school. We would talk about like, oh, that's racist, like that, like as amongst friends, but like we didn't really have the the conversational tools to really dive deep into it that like it deserved. There
There
would
wasn't
be
a teacher facilitating those discussions or
there would be
facilitating reflection.
moments,
Yeah.
yeah, there'd be moments, but nothing really like, let's go deeper into this. And so, yeah, I think you're very right. I think the middle school is a perfect opportunity, especially at a school like Pembroke. I'm like, man, if we can get them before they go to high school and start really making, these decisions. And then at a school like that, what I'm hoping, if the relationship stays there and they don't fire me and I don't want to leave, is that the relationship doesn't have to stop. So, though I might be the dean of the middle school, hopefully I can continue to follow up with these kids and establish a relationship that can carry on and keep checking in on them while they're in high school, because the schools are actually connected. I mean, you can literally walk through and it's the high school and the middle school.
They're going to be coming into your office.
I
Hey,
hope
Mr.
so.
Muhammad, I remember this. I want to talk to you. I want to reflect on this.
Well, know that
And
they
let's
can
be
like,
clear about like what it is you're hoping to teach them. It's like you're not indoctrinating people in some like nefarious way. Like right now, unfortunately, there's people up in arms about that with the red herring, straw man, whatever the logical term is. But you're talking about helping people reflect on the significance of race as something we're socialized into. What are we talking about?
yeah, I mean, from a dean perspective, what I'm trying to bring in, and I'm still working on my approach to it, is going to be looking at looking at an incident through a restorative justice lens,
Cool.
whether that's race, whether that's gender issues, whatever may have you, there has to be a recognition that, and I think this is what we have to start looking at even on when we talk about critical race theory and everything. There has to start being a recognition that actions affect people, and by a product of that, they affect the community. When you do something to someone else, you don't only harm that person, you harm the community that's around that person. And there has to, and the restorative justice mindset really is taken from, you know, progressive incarceration practices where they're trying to re-enter people into society. You know, recognizing that, like, you know, even if I wasn't intending it, that person's hurt. And so then there needs to be, you know, conversation between the two people where the victim can have a space to express why they were hurt. The person who did the harm can acknowledge that they did it. And then those around it can also chime in about how it affected them. And then from there, creating some kind of recalibration that's going to allow growth of the person who did the harm to learn through it, and not just a punishment that's going to embarrass them and maybe make them want to do something else.
Mm-hmm.
But also healing for the victim, because oftentimes we slap the wrist of the person who did it and the victim's still over there having trauma. And then something else that's going to allow that person who did it, once they've done their recalibration and they've, you know, paid for their crime, to be admitted back into the community without judgment. And I think that if we can establish that, you know, in the school level, that can go out into society. And that's all critical race theory really, to me, sounds like, is restorative justice.
Mm.
Like, look, nobody's saying it's your fault, bro. We're just saying, like, let's just acknowledge that the crap happened. And as a result of it, some people are hurting from it. And it's not taken from you to say that it hurt somebody, you know, but like essentially it's like telling somebody, you know what, when you fell off, when I pushed you off your bike and you hurt your knee when you were in third grade, right? And you're now telling me that because of that, you've had to walk a little funny for the rest of your life. Bro, why are you bringing that back up? That happened back then. I don't have to acknowledge you. No, all I want you to do is say, man, I'm sorry. Like, when I did that, I didn't mean to, or I understand that what I did was wrong. You know, could I maybe help you with some medical fees so that you can, like, that's all it is acknowledge. Like, it's doing exactly what we tell our kids to do, to own up to the fact that something that was wrong exists, and then to try to help, you know, work to heal it.
Yeah, it feels like, I think something in there feels like marriage 101 to me. Like intent doesn't equal impact. Like if I do something that hurts my wife and she's upset about it, and then I say, "Well, I didn't mean to." Okay.
Yeah.
And yet, like here she is still hurting.
And even bigger than that, like, what makes this so crazy to me is that, bro, we're not even saying you did it. We're not even coming at you and saying you did this. We're just saying we want you to recognize that some other folks did this that happen to look like you know, and you may benefit from their actions, but it's not your fault. Nobody's saying
Yeah.
it's. Um,
I'm always, and as a white man, it's honestly, I feel conflicted about that. Like I feel conflicted about that because, like, so in my ancestry, um, about 99% sure, like I don't have slaveholder ancestors, yet I hope, but well, you know, like I clearly really care about trying to fight for racial justice, and yet still like to release me from that agency that I did it. Like I don't know if I deserve that. I don't know if white people as a whole deserve that. I'm afraid that if I as we white people get let off the hook too easily, um, that's not justice.
well, I don't think it's about letting anybody off the hook.
Hmm.
I think that if we see, that's the thing that I'm processing this right now as you're saying it, so I may think something different tomorrow. But like, if restorative justice is done well, everybody heals,
Hmm.
right? Like, you know, if a you know, take the analogy of what you said about a marriage. a man or a spouse does something that harms their wife, husband that harms their wife, whether that's physical, emotional, whatever. They go to therapy to acknowledge it and grow through it. At the end of that, and now he may be reluctant initially, right? Because it hurts. Heck, I might not even feel like I'm guilty. I didn't do nothing. But if he goes through the process, they both heal. They
Yeah.
both come from it. And I think that that's what we have to recognize. And the examples are out here throughout the world. Rwanda, people talk about Germany a lot, but you got Rwanda, you've got countries all over where they acknowledge the harm and they've tried to work through it. And I think if we just stop being so afraid of the truth, because if we reframed it and didn't call it critical race theory, and we said, do you have any problem with people teaching true history of America? I don't know if they could debate that. They're so patriotic. We just want to teach the true history, like the honest history. We should teach the truth, right? Do you agree we should teach the truth? And then they're going to have to say, yeah, and they might come back and say, well, which truth do you mean? No, I just mean the true history of America, like everything that happened. Should we teach everything that happened in America? You agree with that? Yeah. And if I told you that by doing that, we're all going to become better people, can you agree with that concept? Okay. Doesn't matter if I call it critical race theory.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it makes me think of a conversation I had with Calvin Arsenia recently, the musician. We were talking about how it's easier. The truth is easier than a lie. Like the truth releases you from the bondage of trying to keep up the lie. And I think that's that's certainly been my experience, like learning about the truth, unlearning all the lies that I'd been told, makes me a more whole and complete person. And the more that I learn to not try to hide it from others, it continues that process.
The truth will set you free.
Hey, there we go.
From day one, right?
Well, we need to wrap this up. We could keep talking for a long time, and I hope we talk again. Maybe you'll be a repeat guest. We can check in with you. So you have a lot of cool projects happening. How can people find out about KC Integrity Karate? Where can they find your music?
Yeah.
We should just throw that out there. I'm very much looking forward to some of the projects you got coming down the pike. Where can they find you? KCIntegrityKarate.com. That's our website. SankofakC.org. If you want to find out about the nonprofit. I'm on social media, Instagram as The Brother News, BROTHA NWEZ. And you can see cute pictures of my kids, and also music updates. If you go on any streaming platform, Spotify, Apple, you can type in Brother News and you'll find my music. I've got an album dropping this week. This week? Oh, well, by the time this is out, it'll be past.
Yeah, so I got 2 albums dropping. One this week, one next week, but they'll be out when this drops.
So this will be like the mid to end of July. Yeah.
By the end of July, 2 albums will be out.
That's 2.
Yeah.
Man, you've been busy.
Yeah. And I've got a couple lined up for August. So
awesome.
Just trying to stay. Well, not trying. I am staying busy. Yeah, and I'm just looking forward. I'm right now. I'm doing some work about trying to get ready for this school year with restorative justice, figuring out what my approach is going to be, and just learning more about it. I'm still really. So but I enjoy conversations. I'm always down, so people feel free to reach out, and that's that.
Cool. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Wide Ruled. I'm so excited to be embarking on this season 2. If you like the show, please share it with one friend. Just do a name drop, send them a link, tell them how you were absolutely blown away. You can support the show financially through Patreon at patreon.com/wideruledpodcast. Pledge as little as $1 an episode. If you want to respond to something David and I talked about, if you have an idea for a future episode, or even want to be in the show, email me at wideruledpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you.